Hello, welcome to Cinemike. For this episode I'm going to review Spider-Man Homecoming. This starts round 3 with the second reboot for a franchise that is only 17 years old. Considering that Spidey is the most popular Marvel superhero, it is a bit crazy how much trouble staying afloat the series has had. Both of the last two Spider-Man series started with a lot of potential, but studio interference, repetitiveness, and cramming in too many plots ended them prematurely. I'm looking at you, Spider-Man 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 2. So what makes this new film different? Well, this time Spider-Man has been taken under the wing of Kevin Feige and inducted into the popular Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's reassuring because they have had a near-perfect track record with delivering true justice to these iconic characters. We were first introduced to this new web-slinger in Captain America: Civil War, and he was a real scene stealer. So many fans sighed with relief, believing that Spider-Man had finally found his true home. The trailers have been so revealing that it seemed that every major plot point was shown. There was even an entire action sequence that was spoiled by one of the trailers because it showed how it resolved. The most disappointing advertising campaign of any of the MCU films to date. To break from my intro for a second though, I can say that this concern is only somewhat true because there are one or two surprises. So did Homecoming rise above and secure itself as another winner for the MCU? Well, to answer that question, I need to address if this movie solved the issues that plagued the previous films. Did it feel like director Jon Watts brought a unique vision? Did his take feel repetitive and devoid of originality? Well, I'll tell you what, I was a bit concerned about him when I first checked out his filmography. He's most noted for that crappy clown horror movie prior to this. So we go from the original films with Sam Raimi, the director of beloved cult classics, to the Amazing Spider-Man films with Mark Webb, the promising director of 500 Days of Summer, and then to this guy. Well, it turns out that my concerns were totally unfounded. He impressed me. Watts did not just simply copy and paste the style of what came before. Rather than focusing on the whole with great power comes great responsibility theme, the movie scales back to just being more simply a coming-of-age story. It's just about what would happen if a typical teenager found themselves in this situation. Homecoming, more than any other Spider-Man movie, really gets across that Peter is just a kid. According to Feige, this movie took some inspiration from the 1980s teen films by director John Hughes. Classics like The Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller's Day Off. A scene from the latter appears briefly in this, by the way. Because of the stronger focus on his youth, it also allows for a Spider-Man who will make mistakes just like any other typical kid would. Another thing that separates this movie from its predecessors is that Peter really loves being Spider-Man in this. So you don't really feel that being a superhero is as much of a heavy burden on him as it was in the other films. This approach allows the movie to have a little bit more fun with Peter, and humor plays a much bigger role in this. There are some great bits. Like, have you ever wondered what would happen if Spider-Man had nothing to swing from? Well, there's a funny moment in this where they answer that question. Another break from the familiar is omitting certain elements that played huge parts with the previous movies. For instance, the origins of Peter's powers from a spider bite, or the death of Uncle Ben. Also Peter's friend Harry Osborn and his father, who just so happens to be the Green Goblin. We hit the ground running with this one, and that's mostly a good thing because we've been flooded with too many retellings of those elements in the past. However, there is something that is also slightly lost in that. Like, because we don't see Peter first discover his abilities or experience the loss of Uncle Ben, there is a certain disconnection from two major events in his life. Events that helped to define him. With this being the third time reintroducing this character, I don't see what other choice they really had, though I do think that they could have maybe done something more to get across some impressions from those events, but they are almost entirely left out. Well, now that I've established that this is a new and fresh approach to the character, let's now answer another question to an issue that plagued the previous movies. Did Homecoming feel bloated with too many plots and characters? Thankfully, they got this one right here as well. The story follows Peter, fresh off of the high of helping the Avengers in Civil War, as he now has to return to being a small-time superhero in Queens, New York City. He craves to get back into the big leagues, and when he stumbles onto Vulture and his gang selling dangerous weapons powered by alien tech, Peter sees this as the perfect opportunity to prove himself. It's a simple enough of a story, and it's told mostly from the perspective of Peter, with the occasional cutaway to Vulture. So we're not jumping all over the place with multiple plots. It's a much tighter package. As far as characters, we of course have Tom Holland returning as Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Coming into this movie, Holland was the most certain element as he already proved himself in Civil War. He's perfect in the part. He's got the nerdy quality down. He really grounds the superhero scale by playing Peter as a normal kid with a big heart. He's funny, he's relatable, and he's also believable in the physical demands and action. This is probably because Holland is an athlete in real life. Have you guys seen the footage of him training? This kid's crazy. The villain is the Vulture, played by Michael Keaton, who's returning to the comic book world for the first time since he played Batman. I have always been a huge fan of Keaton, and I have been really pleased lately to see him make a comeback in movies like Birdman. Here he plays a villain who in some ways comes across like an everyman. He's a guy who's just trying to provide for his family, and he has the attitude of a blue-collar worker. I like that aspect of the character, and it was a nice break from the franchise's more typical villain of being this good-intentioned scientist that is changed by an experiment gone wrong. This guy's not bad because of a tragedy, he's bad because he chooses to be. That said, I will say that there was something that was missing from the character for a while for me. He just felt a bit flat and forgettable at first. Thankfully, there's a really nice reveal later in the movie that mostly solves this issue for me. That reveal is probably the best moment in the movie, and I won't spoil it here. Laura Harrier plays Liz, the popular girl at school that Peter has a crush on. She's this movie's Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane. Pretty much, she's only there to serve that purpose, up until a point where something interesting is revealed about her. Jacob Batalon plays Peter's best friend Ned, who sort of becomes his sidekick after discovering that he's Spider-Man. Not a spoiler, by the way, because it's in the trailers. Ned is a really fun character and is always fanboying on Peter. Jon Favreau returns as Happy Hogan in one of his bigger appearances to date. Funny with this not even being an Iron Man movie, but his dry and deadpan delivery is always great. Zendaya plays Michelle, one of Peter's classmates who may or may not have a thing for him. She's also very dry and deadpan. Her role is much more limited than you might think, but the ending does hint at her having a larger part to play in follow-ups. Then of course there's Robert Downey Jr. flying in as Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. He takes on a mentor role for Peter, though he has a much more hands-off approach than Mr. Miyagi or Obi-Wan Kenobi. He kind of wants Peter to get there on his own. Some fans were worried that he'd take up too much time in this movie, but I think he was used just the right amount. There is one little issue that I have with this cast, and that's Marissa Tomei as Aunt May. I really like Tomei, but she just is not right for this character. With her, it really is more about how hot of an aunt Peter has, and that just isn't what this character is about. Aunt May is someone who is supposed to be seasoned and wise from a long life. That's just totally lost here. This movie is certainly a fun ride, but there is another thing about this that bothers me just a little bit. The Spider-Man suit. Oh sure, it overall looks cool, though I'm not really a fan of the puny and disproportionate spider symbol on the chest. But it's not really about the look, it's all the gadgets. Peter is hooked up by Tony Stark with more gadgets than Q delivers in a Bond movie. Sure, Spider-Man has had web shooters and additional stuff like spider tracers, but this just feels really heavy in all the tech. He is fully stocked with drones, parachutes, even a suit dryer, and that's just to name a few. He's even got an interactive AI sidekick that he names Karen. While some of this is fun, I just think that it somewhat distracts from the character. There's a section of this movie where it becomes more about the toys to a point. This all brings me to my final verdict. Spider-Man Homecoming delivers a new version of the character that feels almost as fresh and exciting as when he first swung into theaters. It's character-driven, action-packed, and with solid visual effects. It's also probably the most fun of all of the Spider-Man movies. Is it the best MCU movie? No, I would not go that far, but it's definitely getting the Spidey franchise back on the right track. For the first time in a while, I'm feeling good about where Spider-Man is going, both in his solo films and with the Avengers. Though I'm still not sure how I feel about the new spin-off films that Sony's planning around the Spider-Man, the first being the Venom film starring Tom Hardy, who I still can't believe that they got. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best that this particular movie could be for me, I would give Spider-Man Homecoming an 8. And that's all I've got for you this time. Click like if you enjoyed this video, and please feel free to leave a comment below. Tell me if you agree or disagree, and I of course welcome you to subscribe to the channel. So until next time, this is Mike, signing off.